Hey, Deliberate Leaders. I am your host, Allison Dunn, executive coach and founder of the Deliberate Leaders podcast, where we're dedicated to helping leaders build strong, thriving businesses. Each episode, we feature inspiring interviews to help you on your leadership journey. And I am so excited to introduce today's guest. We have with us Julie Winkle Giulioni, who is the co-author of Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go. And I would say this is an absolute must read if you want to take your career development conversation to the next level. Julie helps organizations enhance learning, engagements, retention, and ultimately a company's bottom line. She's been named one of Inc. magazine's top 100 leadership speakers. Julie's mission is to help organizations tap their only sustainable competitive advantage, which is their talent. Julie, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Oh, thank you, Allison. I've really been looking forward to this.
Me too. I always love this first part. So having a deliberate conversation, we want to know, what is your number one leadership tip that you would give to our deliberate leader listeners?
Be a prism.
Tell me more.
So, a prism is this unassuming little piece of glass, but it's got the power to take just ordinary light and working through it, it becomes these beautiful hues. And when I think about leaders, the best leaders I know, they operate the same way. They show up transparent, no agenda, none of their own stuff. They're there in service of taking the energy that people in an organization have and focusing it in a way that allows them to discover and explore and transform and ultimately, really step into and own the unique gifts and talents and strengths and superpowers that they have. So I think as leaders, all we have to do is kind of get out of the way and be a prism for others to shine through.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that. And when I think of it, maybe I'm thinking of it in the wrong way, but I also feel like a prism reflects back you're given. So I think the energy aspect of that is beautiful. Very nice. Great tip.
Thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed this book, Helping Them Grow or Watch Them Go. And one of the things that I really appreciated about your book is I'm highly visual, and your visuals throughout this was absolutely fantastic.
Oh, thank you for that. It was super fun playing it out that way as well.
It just made me keep on flipping the pages to be able to absorb the learnings, but then also lock it in with a visual. So it's not just a straight read. It is creative. It's candy for the eyes as well. So that's awesome. Thank you. I am hoping that we can just spend a little bit time today. I know that career development is the foundation of which I know almost all of my clients thrive on. And yet it often feels like it's one of those things that gets cut first, or it's an absent conversation altogether, or people think it's supposed to be some structured process. And you've really outlined some interesting ways for people to think about their own career development and how to own it. So what would be your guidance on how people, if they've not been having a career development conversation, how to start one? How do you do that?
Yeah. So as leaders, I think so much of the power of a career conversation really boils down less to, what you do and more about who you are and how you show up. And so, again, the folks I've seen who really engage in powerful development dialogue with others, they tend to, really see that their role is to be of service. They come with the assumption that everyone can learn and grow and that there's more that they can bring to the party. And, there's a humility, there's a generosity, there's a curiosity that operates. And I think at the end of the day, from my perspective, the syntax and how you do it, the techniques, the verbal formulas, all of that is really secondary to the spirit with which a leader approaches the conversation. So that's kind of where I start is, let's check our intentions. And if we've got the right intentions, then, the book, the training we do, all of that just kind of takes it to the next level. But I have seen some, really committed leaders have very clunky conversations. If you're going to like evaluate the mechanics of it, you give it a big laugh. But it was authentic and genuine and in the moment, and it was exactly what people needed.
For sure. So my takeaway there is that it's the intention behind it. It's not so much how the conversation happens itself. So
it's kind of back to being deliberate, right?
Absolutely. I love that. I appreciated the perspective of you're highlighting that there's three distinct types of conversations. So would you mind sharing what those three are, and just a little bit so that people can think about that for themselves?
Sure, you bet. So one of the things that we did some research before writing the book. And what we found was that the number one impediment from a leadership standpoint, number one barrier standing in the way was time. And so we knew we had to, if we were going to create some sort of a framework, it had to operate at the speed of business. And so this three-part framework operates just like that. The three parts are hindsight, foresight, and insight. And so hindsight involves those questions and those conversations that help somebody understand, who they are and where they've been and what they've done and what they love and what they want to do and where their interests lie and their passions and their values, maybe what they don't want to do. It's all of that kind of baseline information that we typically associate with career development. And it's also real similar to, kind of the questions we ask people during an employment interview. And it's interesting because we're so curious under those circumstances. And then once we invite them into the family, once they become part of the organization, it's literally and figuratively end of discussion. So hindsight is about kind of keeping the interview going over the course of someone's career. So then if hindsight is looking backward and kind of inward, foresight is about looking outward and forward. It's about understanding what are the needs of the business, where are we going strategically? It's about looking at the environment, the industry, the sector you're in, and then even broader than that, the big picture stuff like changing demographics, economics, geopolitical issues, environmental issues, the stuff that's normally the domain of strategic planning sessions. But the truth is all of that absolutely has implications right down to our individual jobs because it creates the guardrails, the playing field within which career development is possible. So that's foresight. And then where hindsight, where I've been, what I love, what I want to do, intersects with foresight, where are things going, what are the needs? That's what we call insight. And that's the sweet spot to be mined for possibilities and opportunities and actions to help people move forward and ultimately learning.
Yeah, I love that. And it's such a great demonstration of you can get gems from every angle of it. So it's not just always forward, right?
Yeah. And when you bring the two together, that's when you have a really great win-win. Because if it's all about the employee, that's not sustainable. The organization can't forever make investments that are one-sided. If it's all about the organization, employees aren't going to be interested in that long-term. And where we can blend the two, so what I'm learning, what I'm growing, what I'm wanting to do fuels what the organization needs. I mean, what leader is going to say no to that?
Exactly. There's a few chapters that you have really great titles for each of them. And so to tee that up, I think a lot of people, when they think about career growth, it's like, climbing the corporate ladder, right? Or, taking the elevator up to the top floor and whatnot. And you do a really good job at exploring how career development can have a lot of different ways. It's not always up, right? And I'm happy to kind of tee up a couple of the topics, but is there, you kind of talk through chapters of what does development look like when it's not necessarily up,
Yeah.
So what one is your favorite? What's the most common one that you see? And what's the one that you'd like people to think about the most? And I realize I asked all three of those at one time.
No problem. I'll just answer all three together. Backing up just a little bit, you're so right, Allison. We have been brainwashed, and it's the weirdest thing. I would love to get into our DNA and understand it, because we've got these expectations about what career development's supposed to look like that's based upon our parents' generation, when it was the whole cradle to grave sort of work-life relationship. And so there's part of me, there was a period of time when I was doing this work that I thought maybe we just need to nix the word career altogether, because it's such a trigger word. It really hijacks the brain. And as you said, takes them right to, the ladder, which of course is limited and limiting. And, we've got all sorts of other factors that just make growth through promotion not the most plentiful of options available. And so what we did in the book was we figured if we were going to try to lose the ladder, we need to introduce something else. And the metaphor that we used was a climbing wall, because it was more reflective of organizations today and how growth really happens. Certainly there are some opportunities to go up, but there's a lot more room laterally. There isn't just that one path, rung by rung by rung, up to the top floor, as you had mentioned. There are a gazillion different ways to get from A to Z, up and down and over and around and back. But the thing that was most fascinating to me, and the huge aha I had, we decided if we were going to put this in the book, we'd better go and actually have the experience of climbing on one of these walls. And so you can imagine, we took pictures, one of which is in the book. The rest are in a vault. But the big discovery right after I learned I had no upper body strength was, depending upon where you put your hands and your feet at any given moment, you could challenge yourself. You could have a great view. You could be having fun. You could be building capacity and muscle without going anywhere. And so that is the one big aha for me, and the one big, huge, really, opportunity I think we all have in the workplace is we think we've got to go somewhere to grow. But the truth is, the one of the titles of the chapters I think you were talking about was Same Seat, New View.
Yes.
The truth is that if we're deliberate, if we're intentional, we can use the envelope of our current role for development. We can develop in place, bring in the challenges, the opportunities, the connections, the experiences, whatever it might be, right there to create interest, to create greater capacity, to build our ability to contribute, and ultimately to grow. So I really, of all the options, I'm really enamored with this idea of using our current role for growth rather than kind of waiting for some place in the future where growth is going to come to us.
Yeah. That is a conversation that I'm often saying, whether, especially, I've got young adult children who are saying, I need a promotion. I need to be reviewed. And I'm just like, honestly, you can do whatever you want right from where you're at, and it'll earn you in that direction. So maybe be willing to try it from where you're standing, as opposed to thinking you need to move somewhere, right?
You're so right. And so frequently, especially young people, I think, although, probably all of us, the grass always looks greener somewhere, right? And, folks who just kind of reflexively have decided they want to go into management, just because that's the next rung. But when they get there, it's like, whoa, I don't even like people. What was I thinking? So being able to invite small bites of that, maybe you've got someone who wants to go into leadership, they're not ready. And so let them do orientation for your department. Get a taste of it. See if that really does align with what they want to do. If it's something that they've got capacity for, let them grow, incrementally rather than in those scary leaps.
Right. We're in a very unique time in our life, I think, especially from a worldwide, this conversation is relevant no matter where someone may be listening from. Why do you feel like it's ever more important to focus on developing ourselves in career development?
Well, I mean, yes, to your point, it's always been important.
Mhm.
We know from our own experience and from the experiences of our organizations, career development is the number one reason people come to a job, number one reason they stay, number one reason they give for leaving. So it's always been right now, I think the importance is amplified for a couple of reasons. If COVID has taught us nothing, we have learned that the world can change literally overnight. That all of the plans, all of everything that we've put in place can overnight become irrelevant. And while I think we had kind of an intellectual understanding, now we've all been punched in the gut with it. And the idea of remaining relevant, building the capacity for agility and flexibility um, is front and center for most people. There's research from the Institute for the Future of Work, and they suggest that 85% of the jobs we're going to be doing in the year 2030 have not yet been invented.
Yeah,
They're
this
not even on
blows my mind.
I know. And so between that and the COVID realization, people understand that the choices that they're making to grow now have long-term implications for their ability to contribute, to remain employed, to keep food on the table for their family. So I think the maintaining relevance piece is huge. And then the other reason that career development may be even more important today is just the connection. But even before COVID and the work from home migration, there was already a huge loneliness epidemic that we were experiencing. And so it's only, exacerbated that. And career conversations, are really intimate. They're probably the most intimate, personal way managers and employees interact. I mean, when you're dealing with people's hopes and dreams and futures and all of that. And employees are craving connection right now, and a career conversation just fills that need.
I think one of my takeaways is that it's not just a one and done conversation. I think you say, it's that thousand little conversations. Move it forward. So don't just think you're to go in and knock on the door and ask for it, and then be like, it's coming. It's a lot of little ones. Yeah,
exactly. And I like to think, about it as like time released. The headache pills we take, or a subscription model. We used to pay for something once and then it was done, but now we're paying for Netflix every month, right? Same thing with career development. We got to pay our dues. We got to spend some time with people all year long.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I always hate to date an episode, but we are heading into the Thanksgiving week, and we're coming towards year end, and we've had this unique opportunity of people working from home and maybe even less focused on training and development and career trajectory. So why do you think it's a really critical time right now for leaders to lean in and do some development reviews?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked about that, Allison, because I think this is going to be a really important focus for leaders this year. And I've talked to so many managers who just feel like they're ready to throw in the towel, throw up their hands. It's been, a hot mess of a year. All of their plans went out the window back in March. I mean, why even have this conversation is what I keep hearing. And why even have this conversation is because, exactly as you said, it's been an extraordinary year. You look at essential workers who are playing Russian roulette, every time they go to work, the healthcare providers who are on the front line of this pandemic, the emotional labor that they've had to commit to. You look at the innovation. There was a young man I was talking to the other day, and early on in the pandemic, he worked from home all day long, and then he would sneak back into the office, and he retooled the 3D printer to be able to make PPE, personal protection equipment. Extraordinary stuff. You think about the parents the employees who went home and are working full time and parenting. This is a year where folks are physically and emotionally, and in many cases, just spiritually exhausted. And so even if we didn't reach the goals we thought we were going to, even if all those plans back at the beginning of the year became null and void come March, this is really a year to celebrate what has worked. And there are incredible, advances, innovations, successes that deserve that kind of celebration. It's a time to pause and extract as much learning as we can. If we're going to go through all of this stuff over the last 7 months, let's at least walk away smarter for it, with more insights. And this is really an opportunity. These reviews are an opportunity to reframe the year for folks, to help lift spirits and put people in a position where they're going to be better equipped for the challenges of the next year.
I think that those are some outstanding tips of how do you do it even in a year that maybe you have to throw your plans out the door. So great strategies for doing that. How do you have any thoughts on what the most effective way to do that? Does it need to be face-to-face to be as effective, do you think?
No. I mean, obviously, it's lovely when you can look
Ideally.
eyeball to eyeball with folks. But a lot of the leaders that I've been talking to, they were saying, well, maybe I'll just wait till we can get back together. Don't do it.
That's what I wanted you to say. Okay.
Yeah, no, immediacy is much better. And if you're both prepared, if you ask the employees some really focused questions to get them to, kind of bring a brag sheet to it. If you as the leader have done your own homework and you've got a few nuggets that you can throw in there that the employee isn't going to share, you can send them some, Starbucks credit so they can go get a cup of coffee so it kind of feels like that. There are a lot of things that you can do, but don't wait. Folks need this now.
Yeah. Thank you for being so direct on that. How about for maybe some of our listeners who are here today to try to get mentorship and leadership from experts like yourself, and maybe their leadership isn't having a performance conversation and isn't having a development conversation? What encouragement and words would you give them to help them move themselves forward?
Yeah. It's rough because for so long we've heard that employees need to own their development,
Right.
but it is a partnership. You can't do it by yourself. And so if your manager, if your leader isn't initiating it, don't assume that it's that they're not interested. I think that's a lot of times what we just kind of relegate it. Well, they must not care. A lot of leaders don't know how to do this. It feels awkward. They haven't been trained. It's not coming natural to them. And so as a result, they just don't lead with these kinds of conversations. So you can do them a huge favor and service by taking initiative and going to them and saying, I'd really like to talk to you about what I've learned this year, or about the kind of growth that I'd like to engage in the coming year. Go to them with a, kind of an agenda that's non-threatening. It's not like you're, asking them to give you a promotion, but here's what I've learned. Here's how I'd like to grow. Here's what I'd like to see in terms of support for you. And it's amazing when those kinds of requests are made, how many leaders are very willing to lean in and say yes.
Fantastic. I know that career development is baked into some cultures, right? And then sometimes we have to create that culture that brings it around. So how does someone create a culture that supports an authentic, sustainable career development concept?
Yeah. And so, the culture really is the cumulative effect of everyone's behavior within it. So leaders, we can each contribute to a better, a more sustainable, a more effective culture by thinking about a couple of different traits and qualities. I kind of call them cultural hallmarks. The cultures that really enable the kind of development we've been talking about, they tend to be transparent. There's a free flow of information about how people are doing and where the possibilities lie, and why someone is promoted over someone else. There's not that curtain that leaves everybody like wondering what's going on back there that I don't get. So there's a transparency there. Another cultural hallmark is that these organizations tend to have blurry boundaries. So, some organizations are so siloed, and you've got your divisions or your departments or your functions, and they all act as if they're freestanding units. And when you can blur the boundaries among and between groups, suddenly there's a lot more latitude for sharing resources, for bringing maybe a challenge over here, over there, so that you've got more opportunities. Again, when you think about people developing in role, opportunities for people to do things that are outside of the normal bag of responsibilities. And a third one that I'll just mention briefly is these cultures tend to be patient. And patience is not something that, I think that we're all that great at these days. Organizations are evaluating month by month, quarter by quarter, and development doesn't happen like that. Growth is messy, and learning is sometimes 2 steps forward and then a step back. And so cultures that really embrace development understand that, experiments are going to fail. People are going to not, things aren't going to work out. We need to have a certain amount of risk, and we need to give folks the time that's required to grow in the directions that they're interested in and that serve the organization.
Fantastic. Great tips. So you're working on a new book these days?
Yeah.
Can you share the title, or is that not yet to be released?
I so wish I could. We don't know what it is. No, we don't know what it is yet.
Well, let's talk about it. Maybe we can come up with something. I know that you're working on some new research, and I personally would love to hear about it.
Oh, thank you so much for asking. Yes, I'm really excited. ATD Press picked up on an article that I had written and thought it would make a good book. And so I'm having so much fun with it. So the premise kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. The idea that we've got this limited definition of what career development is, and that it's all about promotions. And a lot of managers just avoid it altogether because they can't give people promotions. And so it just creates this whole, downward spiral. But I contend that there are 7 other, I call them development dimensions, other things you can grow beyond your title and your position that make up your career. So I've created this, sort of bigger envelope. So, in addition to the climb up the ladder, which is a legitimate developmental dimension, there are things like competence. You can create greater competence throughout your career. You don't have to be, climbing up the ladder for that. You can grow your confidence through a variety of different ways, or your connections. So anyway, there's 7 alternate development dimensions. So I know that they're all viable. In fact, they're more viable than the climb because they're within a sphere of influence of the manager and the employee. But what I wasn't sure of is, were they valuable to people? So yeah, they might be there, but do people even, care? And so we just concluded a study of 750 people, and we asked them to take these 8 dimensions and to rank them in terms of what their level of interest was. What did they want to grow? And I was stunned. The number one area of greatest interest, the dimension of greatest interest, is contribution. People want, they want to be able to give more, to do more, to align, their work with their own purpose and find meaning. And the second was competence. And what was fascinating is, as we looked across ages, genders, level of the organization, and whether they were inside or outside of the US, those 2 development dimensions were number 1 or 2 for every single audience. So leaders can go confidently into conversations knowing that employees are really interested in growing contribution and competence. And again, what leader is going to say, no, I don't need more from you? I mean, it's crazy. But the most stunning part of the research, and I still, every morning I wake up and kind of, rub my eyes and look at it again to make sure I didn't misunderstand it. The really stunning thing was that 8 out of 8 in terms of this ranking, whether somebody was in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s or above, whether they're men or women, whether they were executives or individual contributors, whether they lived in the US or outside of the US, across the board, the last thing they were interested in was the climb, advancing through promotions in other positions. And so, what this tells me, and I think the hopeful message for leaders everywhere, is that you have the ability to help people grow in ways they actually want to grow. And some of the things that were holding us back, the fear that we couldn't give them something, it's nonsense. We can absolutely give folks the growth that they so want, and in the process serve the organization as well.
That is fascinating. And it almost a little bit, kind of debunks almost what I think a lot of people think, right? In order to have a career development conversation, we have to talk about a promotion or something, higher. And that's fascinating. It gives me so much hope in humanity to know that contribution is number one.
I know, me too. Yeah.
And contribution is something that we can allow and enable and encourage and enlighten everyone, no matter where they are or what skill set they have.
Exactly.
That's so beautiful. I love that. When is your new book due to be out?
It'll be fall of next year.
Okay, so you've got a little bit more writing to do. That is super exciting. And you don't have a title yet, so I can't.
No, I'll let you know as soon as we get one.
I tell you what, as soon as it's ready, I would love to reconnect on this conversation and maybe talk about your new book right before it goes to press. That would be fantastic.
I would love it.
Julie, what is the best way for people to either connect and or follow you?
Oh, thank you for asking. I've got a website. It's a mouthful. It's juliewinklegiulioni.com. But I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter at Julie Winkle Giulioni, and I'd love to connect with your listeners.
Oh, fantastic. I so appreciate all of your insights today. I am excited to see your new book. For anyone who's listening, I will have a link to the Amazon for this book. And again, super great eye candy. And I think it's not only a leadership book, but it's also for anyone who's going to take their career seriously on making sure that it continues to move in the direction that you choose to have it move. So, Julie, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. I hope you have a beautiful Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much. You too, Allison. Thank you.
Thank you.